Good evening, everyone. Welcome to AI Curate Webinar Specials CXO series. It's a privilege to have Dr. Rohini Srivatsa with us today to discuss on the topic AI for India, solving large, complex, and unresolved problems. This session will be moderated by Samir Dhanrajani, CEO and co-founder, AI Curate Advisory and Consulting. Before we start the session, few housekeeping rules. Please be on mute for uninterrupted listening experience. Leave your questions in the chat window of WebEx. We will take those up for Q&A. This webinar is being recorded and this playback video will be hosted on our website, www.aicurate.ai. I would like to introduce Dr. Rohini. As National Technology Officer for Microsoft India, Rohini is responsible for helping customers and partners across industry and government drive innovation and growth through tech intensity in the age of Industry 4.0. Her 25 plus years career spans business and technology with strategy consulting at the BCG and IBM Global Business Services, operations and sales at startups, and R&D at AT&T Bell Laboratories. Rohini is a member of the Wiley Innovation Advisory Council. He is on the Advisory Council of the ECE department at CMU and serves on the Scientific Advisory Committee for NMICPS, Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. She was recognized among the top 10 most influential analytics leaders in India in 2019 by the Analytics India magazine. Rohini holds an MBA from Wharton and earned her PhD in computer engineering from UT Austin. Thanks, Dr. Rohini, for making time to be in our webinar specials today. Samir would now like to hand over the session to you. Over to you, please.
Thanks, NK, for the introductions. And Rohini, it's a pleasure to have you at the CXO series session. I have a privilege of knowing you as a professional, as a person, and we've interacted multiple times in the past. And I think it would be great to kind of take your perspectives because the topic, I think, seemingly fits right into what you currently do, and there is a large mandate what you carry as part of your responsibility at Microsoft. Just to get the ball rolling, Rohini, and I would like to take your perspective on this larger piece around AI policy. Many countries, many geographies have curated AI policy for their own good. The policy talks about multiple things in terms of what it should be done as part of interventions to create deep impact using AI. Coming to our own backyard, India has created its own policy. In fact, there are a couple of departments who have taken initiatives like Niti Aayog and METI kind of a thing. The policy also entail on the AI front, the proposed intervention. So for the, just to get the ball rolling and for, I would say, to get to know our participants this few, what are the proposed interventions you believe the policy has, and what are the adoption metrics we are adopting as part of going fast in terms of embracing and kind of adopting AI? So would love to hear your thoughts, please.
I think first of all, thanks very much for having me in this forum. I appreciate that opportunity. As you very rightly said, coming to the country's AI strategy and policy as such, clearly Niti Aayog had put together a fairly well thought out strategy document almost 2 years ago now, 2018, right? And that policy there, or I would call it actually a strategy document, has laid out priority sectors, initial use cases, and is a pretty well thought out now document. But I would say that from there on, to be fair, there have been work happening in the area of, for example, the personal data protection bill, and of course the overall India stack has been moving the country in the overall digitization journey. But from an AI bringing the strategy to reality perspective, there is more work to be done. And we all know that because the strategy document was there, but really what is required to make that strategy real, meaning things like data, things like the platforms required, the entire gamut of what it takes. And you are right, there are countries which have really thought about their implementation or making strategy come to reality thought across a well-structured framework, and you know the likes of McKinsey, etc., are working with countries around the world. So the short answer would be that that there is work to be done to bring the strategy out into real implementation and make a real difference to the country. Now, you would have noticed that this last week, the National AI Portal was launched, right? And that's a joint work between METI and NEGD. And clearly that's very much needed. And one would expect that behind that set of initiatives are taking shape and will happen to make sure that the strategy is bringing some real action. But the question you're asking is very timely, and I would say that there is work happening in terms of bringing those to light, but more is needed.
So you talked about this portal, Rohini, and I think from a participant perspective, they could able to get this view about the need for an AI strategy on a country or a specific geography. What the portal is trying to do is, to my own understanding, is trying to evangelize more kind of adoption scenarios on AI side. From your own vantage point, do you believe there's more which can be done on this portal? Of course, this is just a beginning. The government has launched, but in which direction you see this portal going as part of the larger initiative?
So, I mean, look, I think the portal is just a destination for resources, for information, for acts, for expertise, sharing of best practices. I mean, one can take a portal and make it a platform in multiple ways, right? But at the end of the day, that's the outcome of work that needs to happen, right? So I think it's great the portal is out there. It's great that we have a strategy. But clearly, there are some building blocks that need to be put into place to create value from the strategy that can then find its destination on the portal, right? That's the way I would think about it. I mean, at the end of the day, the strategy has to bring real economic value to the country, and then you have some really great stories to be put out on the portal. So I think the question that you started out with saying, what is the strategy, and in many ways from the role I play in Microsoft and my charter of driving AI initiatives for the country is taking that view that AI is not just about enterprises and commercial private sector, but it is actually a much broader holistic, broader canvas is required there to be thought about as a technology as a whole, and which is why whether so India is on its way, but as a responsible and active part of this ecosystem, we are driving with our customers and partners AI adoption, with the government on both on use cases, on policy, as well as skilling and other things that we can talk about more, and social impact. But the uber point is, we are as an organization leveraging the ecosystem in terms of priming that adoption. But clearly the government has a much bigger role to play. And that's what I'm saying to your earlier point, that much needs to be done to bring that strategy to reality. And there are building blocks in terms of data and platform and skilling and clear use cases that needs to happen. And that's the work that's ahead of us.
Wonderful. So one of the things you mentioned as part of your narrative, Rohini, was this about AI bringing a bit of upliftment on the economic output side and aiding really the kind of, let's say, the growth of not only the organizations, but even the countries as well. Now, if we take specific to India, this point around government has launched, of course, a lot of initiatives like Make in India, Digital India, Skill India, and you work with a lot of industry consortia, a lot of government, I would say, bodies for the policy making, and also in terms of really, I mean, kind of understanding what they do as part of the overall AI. Now, one of the things over there is public services, the public institutions over there. My understanding says today they are sitting on treasure trove of data. Of course, there is a lot of disparateness in terms of how they work, and in terms of efficiency and effectiveness. That's a different thing. But specifically, if we take that particular side of public institutions, and let's say we peel that and take, let's say, some of these sectors like healthcare, governance, or smart cities, or let's say even things around financial inclusion, what India is focusing on, there's a great opportunity where AI can play that role. I want to start and take some initial, rather, perspectives from you with some of these things, like specifically healthcare. I know you've been involved in many of this COVID kind of, let's say, scenarios, how the government is working. Would you like to throw some light what's happening over there? And one is, of course, what's happening and what can be done to actually enhance this whole aspect of AI, what I say being AI positive over there.
Yeah, so let me to draw sort of a link from the previous question, right? You are right that there is data, but again, we know that data is one level, but there is both quality of data. There is whether data is there in a platform that's usable, siloed nature of data, the the transformation of that data into ways into which can be ready for models. So there's a whole bunch of housekeeping things that need to happen before one can start to throw it at AI algorithms, right? So that is the kind of work that needs to happen. But let's come down to the fact that as COVID has taken all of us by storm, right? What we are seeing that across multiple states, the data that is there is beginning to be used, or rather it's getting now used for decision making. Now, I wouldn't call it AI per se, and that's fine. As long as you are able to bring the right data and look at the data using dashboards or any other kind of visualization that can allow you to make decisions. Because that's the reality of today, right? When you're sitting in a state COVID war room, the ability to say which areas are quarantined areas, which areas, which hospitals need certain kind of equipment or personal protection equipment or whatever, right? Ventilators, etc. Testing facilities, logistics, many of those aspects, you need data to be able to make those decisions. So we are seeing that that data-driven decision making now happening in the states, right? But clearly much more has to be done, because now you start to say that you want to do contact tracing, and what kind of data are going to use, privacy issues, anonymization. All of those aspects are very much in front and center in the government's mind. Now, if I take that and say, okay, so looks like the government is clearly seeing in this scenario that data can drive decisions and can drive just operational,
Rohini, I think you went on mute. Sorry. Rohini, sorry, you're on mute. NK, can you hear that?
No, she's not on mute, but the voice faded away. Just trying to check.
Rohini, sorry, we are not able to hear you.
Rohini is not on mute. Maybe some issue with the mic.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes. Sorry about this glitch.
A little bit of network glitch, which sometimes does happen, but yeah, I'm back. So what I was saying was, can you hear me now?
Yes, absolutely fine. Please go ahead.
Perfect. Yeah. So I think so starting with data for decision making is a good place, and I'm seeing governments now looking for epidemiological models to say, okay, how do I see the transmission rate happen over the next 2 weeks, right? And the desire to use some prediction capabilities to plan ahead. All that is a great sign. Now, from this vantage point, clearly, and before COVID happened, when I worked with the government on multiple areas, data is being used in the finance, Ministry of Finance and in other areas, but in silos. The use cases are small. The scaling has not yet happened. If you look at, for example, the government's e-marketplace, there is data and AI being used for multiple things. I mean, we have to say the government in that way has laid out the foundation in many ways, specifically with Digital India, right? From a public infrastructure perspective. And that is what is laying the groundwork for us today to say we have this amazing UPI system. We have the whole, identity system. That then allows us to say, now this data is ready to be really leaped into have that next orbit of growth. Right, and COVID is I think nudging from these use cases I just mentioned about is that, well, you are there in the data now. How to make it have that impact that is beyond data silos. And so now I'm seeing the likes of Niti Aayog and others that we're working with think about platforms, right? Because now platforms, as an example. And all of this is happening. So you will see it in coming along. But the thinking that how to make sure that that among the migrant workers, the most needy can be reached, and how do you get money to them? By the way, India, because of the UPI and that infrastructure I just spoke about, is among the few countries where direct benefits could be transferred to people when the whole COVID system happened. And there are countries out there who actually really are wondering how to do this, right? So,
and we have, just adding to the point, and it's a great point what you government initiated this financial inclusion with Jan Dhan accounts for the underprivileged section. So there is a great segment of population which has those access to the bank accounts and banking facilities today.
Yeah, and exactly right. So in many ways, I think we have to feel very proud in India in many ways because of the sort of India stack and the whole infrastructure that has been put into place. Now, clearly with Aadhaar, there were privacy issues. It's gone through its own journey. We have the PDP bill in the parliament. Of course, now it's going to take its time with the COVID taking precedence. But anyway, the point being that the Supreme Court has made its direction in terms of where and how Aadhaar can be used. So we've been through that journey. But the point, to your point, right? The financial inclusion, Jan Dhan, the UPI from a whole payments, fintech complete revolution perspective, right? A lot has happened, but more has to happen. Country is large, country is very complex, and has very urgent problems. So I feel very optimistic about what has been built and what needs to be built on top of it. What I would say is few things, right? One, the fact that data is there is not good enough. It needs to be on platforms that allow it to be leveraged and unlock the value. Two is these platforms where data can be leveraged require necessarily public-private partnerships, because there are entities in the private sector in India that have got both the muscle, skills, and appetite, in particular the startup ecosystem, right? Give them the data and let them innovate. But for that, you need a platform that allows for this public-private partnership.
So maybe even in that way, Rohini, and that's a great point what you touched. Are you referring to like the government in collaboration, as you rightly said, the private-public partnership should create kind of a sandbox environment where startups can come in, academia can come in and kind of do not only research, build prototypes, MVPs, and ensure that those, and that of course needs to happen on that platform, those whatever innovations are happening then can be leveraged for the betterment of all these adoptions through AI or other technologies. Is that true, what you're saying?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I mean, the government has an open data initiative, and I worked with an academic institution in terms of hackathons using agricultural data, and I do think that data requires a lot of work to make it usable, which is fine. I mean, it's a good first step, but there is a lot of proprietary data. There is a lot of private data. Now, the reality, Samir, is that there are technologies out there that, in fact, Microsoft has those technologies which allow you to have a trusted custodian that allows you to share data in ways that preserves privacy, in ways that manages and has governance to enable what data gets shared, what level of anonymization, how long it gets shared for, and that kind of multi-party collaboration is needed to be able to bring the both private, public, and not just open data, but even proprietary data in a way that one can drive value from it. So to your very first, I mean, it kind of builds on each other, right? Data is one thing, quality of data, then platforms, and then platforms that allow innovation. So there's a lot of work to be done. Some of it is now happening in the context of COVID. I mentioned the point about migrant workers. Similarly, there's point about people, the jobs is going to be a huge issue, jobs and employment, and being able to do that market making. So there are use cases which are being worked on, but there's a lot more to be done.
Sure. No, I think you touched a lot of these great perspectives, and in terms of the what I call the art of possible in terms of solving these large, complex, unresolved problems from an India standpoint of view. That segment, while we took some of these, what I say, problem use cases, is the biggest Achilles heel, what I call it, the governance side. And the machinery today, we've all realized in this COVID and disruptive time, needs to run very fast, which also means, let's say we take this judicial system in India, huge pendency. We're talking about almost about 3 crore plus cases. Average pendency of most of them is about 10, 12 years plus. And that's where, and I'm just taking one case, would like to also hear what else on the governance side. But don't you think the time has come now, or it's more like an inflection point where such governance issues, which are hampering what I say, the whole aspect of citizens not able to really proactively indulge for their own betterment, and then they're getting struggle into these governance system on a much higher basis. Can AI play that role over there? And what government should be doing to kind of enhance or really accentuate this whole momentum, please?
So good point. But before I get there, let me just put one more thought out there from the previous point on data and platforms. The thought I want to put out there, Samir, is that India as a country is the population size, the complexity, and the problems that are in the country need a slightly radical approach. And what I mean by that is, as against some economies where you think about AI for automation, I think in India it should be about augmentation. So one has to be careful as to say that how will you use AI? And I'll come to the judiciary point in a minute, but there's an Uber point I'd like to make before I get there. And the point I'm making is that there is a good mix of augmenting AI intelligence with human skills that has to be thought through carefully for literally every process workflow, every task in industries, that allows for using AI where high skill sets. And let me put an example. You look at healthcare, because it becomes very, very clear, right? You have this huge divide between doctors and especially specialists and the population. Then there is an issue of just access to the kind of healthcare. Now, when you think about it carefully and are able to divide the tasks in a way that somebody sitting in a city is able to provide telemedicine services to somebody sitting in a small town or a village, right? In ways that that can bridge that gap, you suddenly change the whole access issue. Now you add to it the fact that somebody who's low on skills, potentially not a medical practitioner, maybe a basic healthcare worker, can be on the ground and do the medical checkups, the basic vital signs, right? Now suddenly you've added jobs. So you've taken AI, and actually not even AI has come. AI will come in later in terms of diagnostics, but even just a telemedicine scenario. Now you take that to judiciary. And to the point that you're making, the same idea of saying, how do you use AI to solve the issue of inefficiencies, the lack of judges, number of vacant positions in the judicial system is staggering. The pent-up demand, the access to the judicial system, the transparency aspects of it, vested interests. How do you make sure that all of these issues are addressed with, AI can't be a magic wand, but can you now think about ways in which the judicial system can be thought about tasks that need high skill set, attorneys and judges, etc., their bandwidth, but can the more, less skilled tasks, in quotes, be done by people who are basically trained? And can they be married in a way that you can use technology, to provide both access and jobs? Where does AI fit into all this? Clearly, AI fits into in terms of being able to all kinds of use cases like knowledge access, access to understanding what cases require different kind of interventions. They're just something. It's just but the point I'm trying to make is that, yes, judicial is an example of a system that is crying out for need, but it's not something I would say take AI and it'll all solve it. I would say take AI, but understand the India way of having to solve it by augmenting. Then you have a tool that can address the need for jobs and the need for high skill services for the scale for the country.
Wonderful, wonderful. So two aspects, Rohini, and I'm trying to pick up the nuggets what you mentioned in your earlier narrative. One, of course, government really enhancing this data-driven decision-making exercise across their departments. The second is focus more on augmentation. And if I use that extended word, augmentation of skills rather than automation, then this rebalancing the human-machine equation with AI will actually get solved. And that's a great point, which also gives me a trigger to ask about this biggest facet of discussion, which is linked is the skills. Now, we've realized in the past and just in the last few years, skills have really gone for a change. What used to be on the technology side, the legacy applications, tools have gone for a sunset. We have new emerging exponential technologies and AI is the forefront. Now, when we look at the base of the pyramid in India, we talk about many of the workforce, which is, let's say, in the manufacturing or a small and medium enterprises kind of a side. Now, they've not been skilled for many years, for whatever reason we can say. Now, that's a population which, if we take one facet where the government is saying, look, all these digital initiative what India is trying to do is good, but is the workforce understanding or the stakeholders understanding that it needs a massive transformation of reskilling, upskilling? Is there something while working through the various industry, government and kind of consortia you've been able to pick up, which you would like to relay? And also, I would like to hear your view first, because I think that's where this aspect of skilling will get more chiseled out, because it's a big, I could say, an issue as well as something which I think we as a nation needs to think now.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, you are right. Skilling is a topic that was a big headline item before COVID hit, and now with COVID, we see this acceleration of digitization, right? Which means a student needs to learn how to do classes on a virtual platform, right? So a student is learning how to use Teams or whatever the platform they're using to function, right? So the point I'm making is, and same thing with telemedicine. I mean, across the board. So the way I think about AI and skilling, so there is a community that will create AI systems, which is a developer community, which is a community that does data scientists and all, which is what you and I clearly first enter. But to me, that's a very small part of the population, right? The bigger part of the population is going to be people who are going to use those systems or are going to train those systems. And that's what, especially the train those systems are the kind of skills we say these have not been invented yet, right?
Because talking about like labeling, annotation.
Yeah,
right.
That's one part of it. But even things like which they call as machine learning, right? Which is about robotics learning by just showing them how to do. But the uber point I'm making is that for India, the skilling has to happen at the digital level first. By digital level, I mean that ability to operate, let's say, for a frontline worker, ability to operate, let's say, a handheld device that requires the person to either do order entry or be able to look at, whatever the person may be doing in terms of interfacing with the healthcare. So, for example, the example we were talking earlier about in the health scenario, let's say a heart specialist sitting is in the city and somebody in a village is administering basic vital diagnostics, right? That person's ability to use a digital tool and be able to interact with the specialist in the city is critical for the healthcare to actually land. So this
person, Rohini, and you touch a point, and I'm sorry to chime in. It's like a thing over there. We're talking about a mass workforce which is saying, look, AI will take our jobs. Digital will kind of displace what we are doing. Let's say a worker on the manufacturing kind of, let's say, floor, or a kind of a pharmacist in a shop saying, look, maybe the robotics will come in. How do we evangelize this thing? Because it's a big segment. And then, as you rightly touched, there are polytechniques in India, ITI institutes, which have dated curriculums. So is something which radically, and you touched when you said in your narrative, it calls for a big kind of a. What's your thought over there?
Yeah, so exactly, right? So it's in India, the narrative has to broadly be about augmented AI. AI for augmentation, because that opens up both access, as I said, of whether you say screening for cancer. Right now, you have the screening done, which allows you to say, okay, the pressure on specialists can be managed. But my earlier uber point, right, is that when you make AI for augmentation, now you are saying that you have opened up the possibilities for a huge set of the workforce to be part of the value chain. And not just for the sake of the value chain, not for the sake of creating the value chain, but that's the only way in which you can actually bridge the gap between access of services and the jobs, because it's a great win-win. So in the example of the healthcare, going back to it, right? If the person at the end is able to utilize digital skills, now you have created, you're not displacing, that job was not existing earlier. That job did not exist earlier. At that time, previously, before this happened, this person in a small town did not have an option. Had to lose 5 days of their work and their livelihood to be able to go to the city to meet a diagnostic a specialist if they could afford it. And most likely they probably not affording it, and maybe they just the worst possible outcomes, right? So you are actually creating, by giving that digital skill and creating that bridge between a job that did not exist And by making sure that that job exists, access to a specialist, which was not there earlier. So I feel I get very worried about saying automation. Now there are industries, high tech industries or specialized pharmaceutical industries, etc., where for various reasons you will have to automate. And I honestly speaking, I'm not of any belief that we should just be like against automation. No. There will be places for automate, but let's not bring automation as a concept from other countries and lift and shift to India, because it's the wrong solution. I mean, it's the wrong solution for a problem that is not contextual for the country.
Got it. No, I think what you rightly said is the narrative has to be changed, because if you're putting some of these words like automation, displacement, that creates unnecessarily negative connotations in the mind. And already there is a situation where we're talking about job losses or some layoffs because of this situation, which will rather aggravate the whole mindset around that. Look, this thing what India is trying to do in terms of infusing AI intervention is not good. Then there is a separate way which starts, which leads to a lot of people questioning the whole validity of this tool, technology, and practice. I think that's a great point what you say. But alongside, and I want to touch two facets. One is this ecosystem of small and medium enterprises and startups in India. In the past few years, government have done enough. When I say enough, it's like a lot of policy interventions over there. But suddenly, because of this COVID, now we have a situation where they will again pivot and realign their businesses, operations, and models. Now, first, what do you think about how AI as a kind of a practice tool or a kind of a, let's say, a business enabler can solve their problems? And second, from a viewpoint, are there any initiatives what government is trying to do to kind of say, look, how AI could benefit startups and SMB segment in India?
So from a overall benefits perspective, a huge government program has been launched very recently, right? With with a very substantial amount of outlay from the government side. But I think the need of the small and medium business, which by the way in India is another interesting issue. Actually, in India, the small and medium business segment is not as large from a percentage of employment perspective as compared with our peers. And in the peers, one might look at Brazil, one may look at some of the developed countries like Germany, US, but our share of small and medium business is much smaller by at least a couple of factors. What I mean by that is, in India, there's a almost 70% of India's population actually works on the micro businesses. And the micro businesses are businesses that employ less than 10 people. That segment of the economy is actually a problem, because that size of the business is not very scale friendly. So what I mean by that is, India has this problem of increasing the number of small and medium businesses by bringing more of those micro into the small and medium segment. But that's one part of the problem. But the second part, on the small and medium business side, it needs to become a lot more digital and tech enabled at scale to be able to really become the economic engine for the country. It's not there yet. And in some ways, I think COVID is a time where while the larger corporate segment was already going after digitization, the small and medium businesses need to scale up. And many of the things that Microsoft we are doing in terms of small and medium business in a box, in terms of collaboration tools, business applications for the small and medium business, largely directed in that direction. Our partnership with Jio that was announced last year is also in that direction. So, but again, that segment needs to get digitized at scale. More micro businesses, the large tail of micros need to be brought into the small and medium business. Only then can small and medium business actually become a viable engine for the economy.
Awesome. So the other facet, and I know this is something which you've been propagating a lot, is about responsible AI, explainable AI, and I think this whole aspect about algorithmic malpractices, the black box, or having those biases. What do you see that in the Indian context, Rohini, over there? This and how does, and this is more for specific for the AI community, and a lot of the community follows you, kind of a thing. You are high on the Twitter side as well. What do you think should be done over there to kind of create more momentum about avoiding this whole bias and malpractices in the AI ecosystem purely because of this black box situation?
Yeah, so I'm actually thinking about the terms you're using of malpractice, etc. I wouldn't go there yet. So let me put it this way.
I think we lost Dr. Rohini. Let's give her just 2 minutes to come back.
Okay. Sorry, participants, there is a glitch at Rohini's end. She will log in again. Please stay put. Thank you.
Or rather, that's the conversation that, am I audible?
You just, we lost you for 30 seconds, Rohini. You may have to revisit. So glad to see you back, but you may have to revisit your 30-second pitch, please.
Sure. Yeah. So let me have a rephrase. I think even though one may say, AI is yet to become mainstream, it is being adopted in a few places, etc. I would ask the community on the call and broadly to think about principles of responsible AI early on in their journey. And the principles of responsible AI, everybody has got certain perspectives to it. From Microsoft side, there is 6 principles that we have thought about, and we have been through a journey and feel good about that framework of security, privacy, fairness, inclusion, transparency, accountability, safety. The overall 6 principles. Now, the aspect for India. And we are working with Niti Aayog, etc., on their responsible AI thinking and policy, etc. There are few aspects. There's one aspect of regulation, and regulation is a strong word, but there are certain spaces, certain areas where we do believe that there will need to be regulation.
Sure.
In the US, we have got lobbied, and we have taken a strong stance about regulating facial recognition, for example. Right? I think that is one technology that needs to be thought about pretty seriously from a regulation perspective.
Sure.
But that's the law. But when you say there is a law, and really we have got privacy directives in there, and the PDP is coming up. So all of those are steps in the right direction. We are very much for the whole idea of privacy being a fundamental right. Beyond that, there is a sense of responsibility, because not everything can be regulated. And not everything should be regulated, because then you have you're not letting enough tension happen between a technology as from innovation perspective and what regulation tends to do, right? So there's some areas where we ourselves as a technology company are saying this is worthy of regulation, but there are some aspects we're saying let's as a community be responsible and think about issues of fairness and inclusion and transparency and accountability, right? So I think it's that gamut that we need to carefully tread and understand. And by the way, whenever I speak with customers on the need for responsibility, I think the level of engagement is tremendous. People's desire to do the right thing is tremendous. So I think that engagement and active communication as to what do you even mean by responsibility is what I would advocate most for, rather than say let's start with guardrails around everything.
Great. No, I think that's a good perspective what you laid. I think, and what you've been propagating, and I see some aspect over there, because this stream is something which has not been touched as a part of debate, discussions, or even kind of evangelizing in the whole aspect. So I think it's good what you're trying to do in that space. Switching gears, Ronnie, I want to take some questions because they've been streaming in quite with a high velocity. You mentioned as part of your earlier narrative about this migrant workforce.
Yeah.
Huge issue. We know those kind of very unprecedented kind of, let's say, disruptions happened in the whole country. And this segment of migrant workforce became one of the most top of the mind kind of, let's say, news, or kind of, let's say, a kind of, let's say, area of concern for us. Now, as you also mentioned earlier, this whole data collection, compilation, we've been doing that. We have Aadhaar cards, we have financial inclusion system. So what could have happened? Now let's understand, okay, it's happened and it's a great unfortunate scenario. What could have happened where these technologies could have aided the government on ensuring that the right segment of this population gets the right kind of a treatment or right kind of help at the opportune time? So any thoughts over there? And that's the question is all about this migrant workforce and what AI could have done over there.
Yeah, so I think this is a good question, right? I think all of us in the sort of professional or technology world, I'm assuming many of the people in the audience, right? I think it's one of those responsibilities for us, right? That before COVID hit, were we thinking about these problems, right? Were we paying enough attention to trying to get the infrastructure, the platforms, and the data, and the ability to make decisions using data that could have helped solve some of these, even if we don't look at fanciful AI, right? To me, it's just data and be able to look at dashboards and make some decisions, right? So I think it's a very soul-searching point for us, right? Because the pictures out there are heart-rending, and you say, what is the whole fanciful AI about that we want to talk about when you cannot solve some very fundamental questions. I think it's a call for action for everybody in this call, that I think we need to solve some really fundamental questions, problems first, and develop the technology, even if it may not feel like the most hi-fi in terms of the latest AI algorithm, but makes decisions possible, makes action possible, makes real impact possible. So, I mean, to answer, to say that what could we have done, just start from the basics, right? Supplies, food, transportation. I mean, this is just so many things, right? Anybody can come up with, but all of these require decision making at scale that can be driven through data. And why was thought that not happening, where we're not paying attention to the right set of problems that need to be solved? That would be my broader answer. I think it's a call to action for all of us. It's not AI. It's decision making using data, the right decisions at the right time, and as a community, are we solving the right problems?
Decision making at scale. That's the takeaway I'll take. And linked to that, Rohini, there's also a question that there is a misconception around, or rather, maybe it's true, AI is actually for the classes, not for masses. In that regard, what is the job of the government and the AI community over there to ensure that it's reaching to the last mile in terms of impact, and in terms of learnings purely on the right side of the learnings in terms of being aware, and also then it's embedded within the whole ecosystem that, look, this facet of AI can do a lot good for the humanity than actually the whole other side of the world, which is not so good. Any thoughts over there?
So again, it goes back to the earlier conversation, Samir, you were having about augmentation using AI. And the best way to kind of make it real is to go into one or two sectors and make it real there, right? Another sector that's of interest, I think, to both of you and I is education. Now, when you say that, how does it impact the child on the ground? Sitting in some village in Karnataka, right? One can look at use cases. For example, can the best of content be translated into Kannada? Can that child be offered content that is at their learning level rather than whatever grade our education system allows? Now, can the teacher be augmented with understanding of where the class is in terms of dropout possibilities, through signals that the teacher can make the intervention in a large class of 40-50 kids? So there's so many ways in which a real impact on the ground in a particular real case. And I'm actually not suggesting put facial recognition things into every class to understand is the child paying attention. I mean, those use cases are there, but I feel like before we get there, let's talk about the real need on the ground to help the child learn in their language, in their context, at their learning ability, at where they are, how they learn, right? Each one. So I think the possibilities for making AI real on the ground are tremendous. I think, again, going back, it's about augmenting the teacher, about being able to let the teacher have much more coaching and nurturing time with the child rather than correcting time. So I think that augmentation part, and again, personalization part for the child. So I think for every use case, the ability for data to make decisions, ability to have the last mile person empowered and have access to services that they did not, by augmenting people in the value chain to offer those services, even though they may not be the most specialized in that skill set.
Awesome. Sticking on to this education, Rohini, we have a question a bit direct and provocative, but let me take that. Sure. The government has mandated AI in the curriculums today. I mean, from a school level, 6th onwards. And the question is more about, while the government has done a very excellent thing to propagate from a base level in terms of knowledge and sure students will gain, the challenge there is that there aren't any textbooks on AI over there. And the question is more about that, look, you expect students to perch on the top of the tree, catch a kind of an internet connection, go through the digital learning. On the other side, we don't have the books to kind of make student reads on AI. What is India? What is AI community doing over there? I think it's a very relevant question. It's maybe a kind of a straight on our face and asking us what can be done to enhance education of AI at a grassroots and at a school level. So your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. So we from a contribution perspective, have worked with CBSE and in terms of creating content and piloting that with a few hundred schools with the AICTE as well. And have gone through the process of creating content that a 6th grader can use, a high schooler can use, etc. Right? But it's not enough. I mean, more has to be done, and also more has to be done not just from sort of an AI just dumbed down, but in the language of the student at that rate, right? And in the language that allows you to not just learn the output of AI, but creates the curiosity of learning how it works.
More kind of a contextual, right?
How it works, because I think that is what worries me often, is that when I ask a bunch of high school students, when a YouTube shows you certain videos to watch, does it occur to you why you are seeing these? And I think that curiosity to say, I'm seeing these because there's an engine behind what that engine is assuming, what what exactly is it using to give me those recommendations? Those questions are also important. So my hope is that it's not just, okay, AI can do this wonderful thing, but how does it do it? And how can you make it better? How can you think about leveraging that way of solving a problem to other problems? So I think it's a much more fundamental rethink of education. And I wouldn't say we can solve all of it, but I think by making education itself be much more experiential and analytical rather than rote driven, I think that's definitely the first step in that direction from just saying, okay, let's learn AI.
Sure, sure. And this one is more on a, I would say, testing your lighter vein approach. Some countries have AI officers for their own kind of, let's say, geographies. Is it a time in India where we should have maybe a ministry of AI or an officer who is mandated to drive AI adoption and AI implementation in India?
I think I would say that the short answer would be, well, yes, but I would say don't just create a position, but create an ecosystem that can actually drive data-driven decision making across the government, across the different organizations. Right?
However, you may need someone to spearhead, Rohini. I mean, this entire thing.
Yeah. So I think of them as data and AI together, and I think of a journey from data to analytics and decision making, algorithms, prediction, AI, right? So it's a continuum, right? So I think the ability for our country to leverage the goldmine of data that we are now creating exponentially, we definitely should have some mechanism that drives it holistically, not just at a sort of functionary, one person as a designation, but holistically and structurally across the system.
Got it. One last question I want to take, Rohini, and this is something which maybe I think it's a good way to wind up the discussion. From your own vantage point, what is one area or one segment in India which you would like to see where AI can actually provide maximum impact?
I think my top on that chart by big personal passion would be education, because I think what I mean by not teaching AI to people, it's actually using AI in the education sector itself. And I think the possibilities, although we didn't have a chance to go into much of that, but the possibilities there in terms of both, again, access, augmentation of teachers, quality teachers to people in remote areas, personalization of learning, the ability to have multilingual, ability to have even augmented reality type of things to make experiments come alive in augmented reality. There's just the options are so tremendous that I just feel very passionate about the sector of education to transform.
Awesome, Rohini. We would have loved to continue, but we are at top of the hour. But must say, engrossing, engaging, and very thought-provoking discussion, because I think somewhere I keep on saying when a professional and a leader speaks from the heart, it shows, and that's exactly what you demonstrated in the last 60 minutes in terms of the conversation. This whole AI for India as a concept, I think not only me, the participants can see globally that you have a passion, you have really a kind of enthusiasm in terms of what you would like to contribute as a professional. Wish you a great success. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your perspective. Lovely getting you on board. Thank you so much, Rohini, for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Samir. Thanks, Vijay. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.